In the case of Hammer versus Dagenhart, the United States Supreme Court stuck a dagger into the heart of a law that attempted to abolish child labor. Faced with increased concerns over the child labor conditions in mills and factories, Congress decided to take matters into its own hands. In 1916, it passed the Keating-Owen Act, which prohibited goods made by children under a certain age from being sold in interstate commerce. Dagenhart owned a cotton mill and employed two of his sons there. He brought a constitutional challenge against the Keating-Owen Act, alleging that it was an unconstitutional exercise of Congress's Commerce Clause authority. The District Court for the Western District of North Carolina agreed with Dagenhart. The court held that Congress acted unconstitutionally in attempting to regulate child labor because it was a purely local matter. On direct appeal to the United States Supreme Court, the issue was whether Congress may regulate the sale of goods produced by child labor once they're placed into the stream of interstate commerce. The court held that Congress may not use its Commerce Clause authority to regulate child labor, because only the states, not the federal government, may regulate the conditions of local production. Justice Day, writing for the 5-4 court, drew a distinction between production and commerce. Although Congress has the authority to pass regulations of goods exchanged in interstate commerce, the court found that Congress's authority doesn't extend to regulating how those goods are produced. In the Act, Congress had attempted to use interstate commerce as a hook to regulate the intrastate production and manufacture of products, simply because it believed child labor to be immoral. Nevertheless, the court reasoned that the regulation of production is a power reserved solely to the states. By the time a product entered into interstate commerce, the labor of production was over, so Congress was powerless to regulate the conditions of production. The court distinguished prior cases that had upheld Congress's authority under the Commerce Clause to regulate and prohibit the interstate transportation of lottery tickets, impure foods and drugs, prostitutes, and intoxicating liquors. The court reasoned that Congress had the power to regulate the interstate transportation of those things because their shipment across state lines was a necessary feature of their harmful results. In other words, it was the interstate sale of those products and services, not their production, that Congress wanted to stop. By comparison, child labor itself might be harmful, the court reasoned, but the interstate trade of products created with child labor was not. So, Congress exceeded its authority by trying to indirectly regulate local production with restrictions on interstate trade. Thus, the court invalidated the Keating-Owen Act and affirmed the district court's decision. Justice Holmes wrote a dissent arguing that the act was constitutional. Holmes agreed that states may regulate their internal affairs and domestic commerce, but when products cross state lines, those products enter Congress's domain. Because the act confined itself to prohibiting only the interstate or foreign sale of products made with child labor, Holmes argued that it was a perfectly constitutional use of Congress's Commerce Clause authority. Hammer v. Dagenhart represents an early and notorious attempt by the Supreme Court to rein in Congress's power under the Commerce Clause. The attempt ultimately proved unsuccessful because the case was later overruled in the 1941 case of United States v. Darby, which vindicated Justice Holmes's dissent.